Here's how to pick the perfect instrument for your live music event. My name is Mircea Gogoncha. I'm a doctor of musical arts here in Southern California. I have 113 music awards. I've played more than 500 concerts on 5 continents. I have 6 university degrees in music performance, and I've also played at hundreds of events of all kinds. So no matter whether you are looking for live music for a corporate event, a wedding, dinner, birthday, celebration, whatever it is, one of the biggest choices you'll have to make is what genre of music would you like and what instruments should you choose. Now, you probably already have a favorite genre that you like listening to, but you might not also have a favorite instrument. And if you do, that's great, keep that in mind. But here are the most important things to consider when you choose an instrument. All right, first off, let's just get it out of the way. You have to look at your budget. Basically, the more musicians you want to pay, the more expensive the performance will be. So if you're really cash-strapped, you should look at hiring 1 musician or maybe 2. And if you have a little bit more room in your budget, then you can look at larger ensembles like quartets, quintets, full bands, or even have different bands playing in different parts of the venue. But keep this in mind, because this will strongly affect what kind of musician you should get for your event. So when you think of what instruments to choose, you should keep in mind that some of them are really good at playing on their own, and others, frankly, respectfully, are not. The distinction here comes down to whether the instrument is a melodic or a harmonic instrument. And don't get scared here, I know this can sound technical, but basically, a melody is a single line of music, something like the human voice, or typically a flute or a violin. That's a single line of music, that's a melody. And a harmony is when you have chords, so multiple notes at the same time, right? So instruments that can play harmonies, harmonic instruments, are really good at playing on their own. So if you're looking to save money and to book only a few musicians for your event, which also has other advantages, logistics are easier, you don't need so much space, etc., then you should really look at harmonic instruments first. There's really 2 big harmonic instruments that everybody knows and that really fit every occasion, and those are the piano and the guitar, or the keyboard and the electric guitar, etc. Between those, the main question really is, do you have the logistical space to fit a piano or a keyboard? If you're actually looking at a classical piano, you need the actual piano there, otherwise renting one is really expensive. It works if you can afford that, but you have to think about the space and the cost associated with that. And if you are going to go with a keyboard, then you still most likely need power, you need a relatively large space. It's not a small instrument. And you also need to make sure that the venue is accessible for whatever kind of car the musician needs in order to transport that sort of instrument. The guitar is a lot more versatile. It can play pretty much anywhere, and nowadays with the advent of battery-powered amplifiers, we don't really need power either, so it's quite a lot easier. You only need space for 1 person. Typically, you don't need power unless the event is pretty long, and there's a lot of style and genre versatility with both instruments. Now let's talk about melodic instruments. The human voice is one. There's string instruments like the violin, cello, or double bass. There's wind and brass instruments like the flute, trumpet, saxophone, oboe, etc. And these instruments all need accompaniment. They need another instrument to play with them in order to sound good at an event. And there's 3 ways to accomplish this. Number 1 is to get an artist that can do 2 things at the same time. So like a singer-songwriter that can sing and play the guitar, or they can sing and play the piano at the same time. That's one way to solve this. It's not really going to be possible if you have any other instrument than the voice. It's very hard to find somebody that can play violin and piano at the same time. Not really something that you can choose. So you're a little bit more limited in your instrumental palette, but this is a valid option. Option number 2 is to just book 2 artists. So you can have 1 guitarist and 1 flutist, or you can have 1 saxophone player and 1 pianist, etc. And this option has some massive advantages, namely that musicians are going to be more focused, less tired by the end, which will translate into better quality. And also you have more variety because you can have the saxophone player stop for a few songs. You only hear piano as an interlude, and then the saxophone player comes back. There's a little bit more variety there than if you just book 1 artist that consistently does exactly the same thing the whole time. And then the third option is that a musician can use a backing track. A backing track is basically a recorded clip that comes out of their amplification that they play on top of. Now, some people don't like like this because they feel like the music is less live. Part of it is from a can and part of it is actually live. I actually think that's totally fine. The only thing you need to pay attention to here is that the artist knows what they're doing. Basically, you need to see a demo of them doing this exact thing before you book somebody to do that. Because there's two things here. First off, somebody can be really good at playing their instrument, but not very good at technology. And so they might not be able to trigger those backing tracks in time or to do a very good job with the sound mixing, etc. And then secondly, the more technology you introduce, also the more points of failure. So maybe something, will break, something, maybe some of the technology will not act exactly as it needs to. So if you have a really high importance moment, you should keep that in mind as a possible point of failure. So those are your three options. Either you book one artist, you book two artists, or you book an artist that can play together with a backing track. Now let's talk about what happens if you can afford to have more than two musicians at your event. That's when things get really interesting. But you have to keep in mind that everything is a trade-off. The more musicians you bring, the more variety your music gets and the more interesting it becomes, but it also becomes logistically more complex, it becomes significantly more expensive, and the musicians run the risk of taking over the attention of the audience in a way that you may not desire. So if you're looking at the background music performance, for example, I typically recommend that you bring between 1 and 4 musicians, not more than that. Anything more than that, and you're really shifting more into a center of attention type act. So if you have a featured moment when the music should be center stage, then that's fine. But if you're really only looking at background music, typically you want to keep between 1 and 4 artists in order to prevent them from taking over the attention of the audience completely. There are some exceptions to this. For example, in a cocktail hour setting, you can have a jazz band, and maybe the jazz band can have more than 4 musicians. But generally, this is something to keep in mind. And it's also important to keep in mind that if you're looking at background music, singing can be relatively distracting. Again, big caveat here, that's not always the case. Again, jazz is one of those genres that works really well even with a singer. The singer almost acts like another instrument there. But if you're hiring somebody who is a real soloist, somebody who's used to being the center of attention, there's that risk that they will take over from your other things happening at the same time. To recap, the questions you should ask yourself are: how many musicians can I afford? Do they play instruments that function well on their own or in small groups? And what kind of level of attention do I want the musicians to command in my performance? And based on those 3 things, you should decide what you would like to have. Try not to pair melodic instruments without the support of harmonic instruments. So don't pair, let's say, a violin with a flute without the support of a piano, a guitar, an accordion, a harp, or something like that. And try not to get too involved with large groups if you're only looking at background music. If you're looking at the real musical moment, then all bets are off. Just get whatever your heart desires, obviously. Those are the 3 questions that I would ask myself before booking live music for an event. If you have any questions, please let me know. I would love to answer them for you for free. There is a contact me link in the description. And if you're watching on my website, there is the contact menu there and the live music menu somewhere there, which will allow you to get in touch with me. I work with an incredibly talented network of musicians throughout SoCal and beyond. So if you're putting on a corporate event, a birthday party, an engagement, a wedding, an anniversary, a celebration of life, or just a dinner with your friends, please let me know, get in touch. I would love to see if I can help you or at least point you in the right direction.